Someone at your job is building a case against you right now. Not loudly, not with a formal complaint, not with anything you could point to and say, there it is. It's quieter than that. It's the small things, the things that seem too minor to matter, the things you never thought twice about, the way you responded or didn't respond to that email at 9 p.m., the one time you pushed back in a meeting, the 2 Fridays you left at 4:45 instead of 5, the tone of a Slack message someone screenshotted and saved, minor things, invisible things, things being quietly cataloged, stacked, and one day, when the timing is right for someone else, used against you. And here's what makes this so dangerous. According to a 2023 SHRM survey, 79% of employees who were terminated or passed over for promotion said they never saw it coming. 79%. They were blindsided, not by a dramatic failure, but by the slow accumulation of small things they didn't know were being counted. The Bureau of Labor Statistics reports that the average American will change jobs 12 times over their career. But what the statistics don't show is how many of those job changes weren't really choices. They were exits driven by a workplace environment that had quietly turned against someone who never understood the rules they were actually being judged by. This isn't about being paranoid. This isn't about office politics as some abstract concept. This is about the financial cost of being naive about how workplaces actually function and what it does to your income, your career trajectory, and your long-term wealth when you keep losing ground you didn't even know was being contested. Because in 15 minutes, I'm going to show you something nobody puts in an employee handbook. The real game being played at work, why the minor things are the most dangerous things, and exactly how to protect yourself, professionally, psychologically, and financially. Let's go. Marcus had been at his company for 6 years, senior account manager, consistently hit his targets. 2 Employee of the Quarter awards on his desk. His clients loved him. His numbers were clean. He was, by every official metric, a top performer. But Marcus had a habit, not a bad habit, just a habit. When he disagreed with something in a meeting, he said so, professionally, calmly, with data. He thought that was called being a good employee. He also had a tendency to send long, detailed emails when he thought a project was going wrong, documenting his concerns, flagging risks, copying relevant people. He thought that was called being thorough, and he occasionally declined after-hours requests when they weren't urgent because he had 2 kids and a 45-minute commute, and he thought reasonable boundaries were, well, reasonable. None of these things showed up on his performance review. But 18 months before he was laid off in a restructuring, his manager had started keeping a file, not a formal HR file, an informal one. Slack messages, email threads, a note after a meeting where Marcus had pushed back on a direction the VP had already privately committed to. A second note after Marcus sent one of his detailed risk emails, which the manager had quietly started calling negativity in conversations with HR. When the restructuring came, Marcus's name was on the list. His colleague with worse numbers was not. Marcus spent 4 months unemployed, lost $38,000 in income, burned through most of his emergency fund, and spent a year in his next role feeling anxious, second-guessing himself, pulling his punches in meetings, not because he'd done anything wrong, but because he'd learned too late that the game had rules nobody had told him about. Marcus's story is not unique. It is happening, right now, in offices everywhere, and the people it happens to are almost never the ones you'd expect. Before we talk about how this happens, I want to make sure we're clear on the stakes, because this isn't just a career story, it's a wealth story. The income gap between those who understand workplace dynamics and those who don't. Georgetown University research published in their hidden curriculum study found that employees who understood unwritten workplace norms were promoted 2.5 times faster than equally skilled employees who didn't, 2.5 times faster. What does that mean in dollars? Let's say 2 people start the same job at $55,000. Person A understands the unwritten rules, gets promoted on schedule, earns average raises of 5% per year. Person B, equally talented, keeps running into invisible friction, gets passed over once at year 3, again at year 6, averages 2.5% raises instead. By year 20, person A's salary, approximately $146,000. Person B's salary, approximately $89,000. That's a $57,000 annual income gap. built not on talent, not on effort, but on understanding how the game is actually played. And it compounds. Every 401k contribution is based on salary. Every bonus is based on salary. Every future job offer is partially anchored to your current compensation. The Bureau of Labor Statistics data shows that voluntary job changers earn an average of 10% more than those who stay. But that advantage disappears almost entirely if you leave under pressure, without leverage, or between jobs. A reactive exit versus a strategic one can cost you 15 to 25% in your next starting salary, added up across a 35-year career, and the cost of being naive about workplace dynamics is not thousands of dollars, it's hundreds of thousands. To protect yourself, you have to understand the mechanism. How does something minor become something that ends your job or ends your chances for promotion? There are 3 psychological and organizational dynamics at work. You need to know all 3. Dynamic 1, the confirmation file managers, especially insecure or politically motivated ones, don't form opinions about employees randomly. They form a hypothesis first, often based on something subtle, a tone they didn't like, a challenge that felt threatening, a moment where you got more credit than they did in a room. Once that hypothesis forms, this person is a problem. Something called confirmation bias takes over. Every subsequent interaction gets filtered through that lens. A direct email becomes aggression. Thoroughness becomes negativity. Asking clarifying questions in a meeting becomes undermining authority. Each incident alone is dismissible, but the manager starts keeping a mental, or literal, record. And over time, what started as a feeling becomes a file. Not necessarily a formal one, just a pattern of interpretation that, when the moment comes, can be presented as a pattern of behavior. This is why employees like Marcus get blindsided. They're judged not on what they did, but on the accumulated interpretation of what they did by someone who had already decided what the interpretation would be. Here's a counterintuitive truth that costs people enormously. Being right is not enough. In most organizations, perceived contribution matters more than actual contribution. Not always, not everywhere, but more often than the people getting passed over realize. What this means practically, the employee who quietly delivers excellent work while assuming results speak for themselves is systematically outcompeted by the employee with equivalent, or sometimes lesser, performance who actively manages perception. Minor things feed this trap. Not speaking up in meetings, even competently, signals low confidence to leadership. Not building relationships outside your direct team means you have no advocates when decisions are made in rooms you're not in. Not attaching your name to wins means those wins belong to whoever was more visible. None of these are dramatic failures. They are small, consistent, invisible omissions, and they are costing people raises and promotions every single day. Every workplace deterioration has what I call a trigger event. A specific moment, usually minor, that shifts the relationship between an employee and a manager or senior leader from neutral or positive to silently adversarial. The trigger is almost never what the employee thinks it is. Sometimes it's a success. You got recognition in front of leadership that your manager felt should have been theirs. Sometimes it's a refusal. You said no to something, reasonably, professionally, but it made someone feel their authority was questioned. Sometimes it's an ally. You were close to someone who fell out of favor, and their fall cast a shadow you didn't see coming. The trigger rarely gets named. The employee never gets told. They just notice, gradually, that something has shifted. Opportunities dry up. Feedback gets vaguer. They get left off meeting invites. Their instinct says something is wrong, but there's nothing concrete to address. By the time the consequences arrive, the trigger is months or years in the past. The only protection against the trigger event is understanding it exists and actively managing relationships before any problem surfaces, not after. Veronica was a project coordinator at a tech company, sharp, organized, 3 years in. She was preparing for a promotion conversation she'd been waiting 12 months for. In February, a deadline slipped on a project she was managing. Not catastrophically. The client wasn't affected, the team caught it internally. Veronica sent an email to her team explaining what happened and how they'd adjust. She CC'd her manager. The email was honest, maybe too honest. She named what went wrong, who had dropped the ball, and what the fix was. She thought she was being a good manager. She thought transparency was valued. Her manager read that email differently. To him, it looked like Veronica was pointing fingers. Even though no one external saw it, he forwarded it to his director with a one-line note. Veronica didn't know that email existed until her promotion review, when her manager mentioned, almost as an aside, that there had been some concerns about team dynamics earlier in the year. She didn't get the promotion. She didn't find out about the forwarded email until 6 months later through a colleague. That one email, meant to be transparent and professional, had been sitting in a director's inbox for 10 months, quietly defining how Veronica was seen at a level she didn't have access to. She told me, "I spent a year thinking I was building my case for promotion. I didn't know someone else was building a different case about me, with my own words." After that, Veronica changed how she communicated at work. Not by becoming dishonest, by becoming deliberate. She learned to deliver difficult information in person first, document it carefully second. She started building relationships 2 levels above her. She began making sure her wins were visible, not with arrogance, but with clarity. 18 months later, she got the promotion and a 22% salary increase. Same intelligence, same work ethic, completely different outcomes because she finally understood the actual game. Here's the plan, not theory. Specific moves that protect your career, your income, and the wealth you're trying to build. Move 1. Audit your workplace reputation. Right now, you need to know how you're currently perceived before you can change anything. Ask yourself honestly, when your name comes up in a conversation you're not in, what do people say? Not what you hope they say, what do they actually say? Pay attention to these signals. Are you included in important meetings or increasingly excluded? Do senior leaders make eye contact and engage with you or look past you? When projects are being staffed, is your name suggested voluntarily or do you have to ask? These signals tell you where you stand, and if you're not sure, have a direct conversation with a mentor, a trusted peer, or a manager you genuinely trust. Ask, what's one perception of me that I should be aware of? The answer, or the discomfort of not getting one, will tell you more than a year of performance reviews. Move 2. Manage up, deliberately and consistently. Your manager's perception of you is your most important professional asset. Not your client's opinion, not your colleagues, your direct managers. Invest in that relationship proactively, not through flattery, through strategic communication. Tell your manager what you're working on before they ask. Frame your challenges as problems you're already solving. When you bring a concern, bring a proposed solution with it. Make it easy for them to look good when they talk about your work to their leadership. This isn't politics. This is understanding that your manager has pressures, blind spots, and insecurities that are completely separate from your performance, and that navigating those realities is part of the actual job. Once a month, send your manager a brief written update, 3 to 5 bullet points, on your wins, your current priorities, and anything you need. This does 3 things. It keeps your contributions visible, it creates a paper trail of your performance, and it signals professional maturity that most employees never demonstrate. Your manager can protect you, but your manager's manager determines your ceiling. Make it your explicit goal to be known, not just liked, known, by at least 2 senior leaders above your direct manager. Known for something specific, a project, a perspective, an expertise. This doesn't require brown-nosing. It requires finding legitimate moments of intersection, asking a thoughtful question in a larger meeting, requesting a brief informational conversation about a strategic area, volunteering for cross-functional projects where senior leaders have visibility. Why does this matter financially? Because when layoff lists are being made, when promotion decisions are being discussed, when budget cuts require hard choices, the people who have champions at multiple levels survive and advance. The people who only have their direct manager going to bat for them are dangerously exposed. Move 4. Document everything, quietly and consistently. This is the one most people skip until it's too late. Keep a private, running record of your work accomplishments, not for sharing, for protection and positioning. Every significant project completed, every metric you moved, every positive piece of feedback you received, including verbal comments from leadership. Every time you went above and beyond your job description. This document serves 3 purposes. First, it becomes your promotion case, specific, data-driven, impossible to dismiss. Second, it gives you leverage in compensation negotiations because you're not relying on memory or feelings, you're presenting evidence. Third, if you ever face a situation like Marcus, where your record is being characterized negatively, you have a parallel record of the truth. Keep it in a personal document you own, not on company servers. Update it weekly. It takes 5 minutes. It can be worth tens of thousands of dollars. Move 5. Build financial leverage, so work never has power over you. This is the move that changes everything, and it's the one that's purely financial. The reason minor things at work have so much power over people is that most people are one paycheck away from financial crisis. When you're financially fragile, you cannot afford to push back, set limits, or walk away from a bad situation. You need the job too badly, and people in power know that, even if they never say it. A 6-month emergency fund changes your posture at work, not loudly. But you carry yourself differently when you know that if this job ended tomorrow, you'd be fine for 6 months. You make better decisions. You don't accept treatment you'd otherwise endure. You negotiate instead of beg. A growing investment account changes your posture further. Every dollar you invest is a dollar of leverage, a silent vote of confidence in your future that doesn't depend on any single employer. The fastest path to workplace power is financial independence in progress, not completed, in progress. The person building toward freedom behaves differently than the person trapped by necessity. And that behavioral difference, that calm, that clarity, is itself a career asset. Build the cushion, build the investments, build the options. Because the best protection against being used at work is not needing any single job so desperately that you can't afford to protect yourself. Let me put a number on what we've been talking about. The median American worker leaves money on the table in 3 ways they almost never calculate. Missed promotions, being passed over just once at age 35 for a promotion worth $12,000 in additional annual salary compounds over 30 years of career to approximately $1.1 million in lost lifetime earnings, including the downstream effect on raises, bonuses, and retirement contributions calculated on that salary. Reactive job exits, leaving a job under pressure without leverage, costs an average of 15 to 20% in next starting salary compared to a strategic departure. On a $75,000 salary, that's $11,250 to $15,000 gone from your baseline. And that lower baseline compounds in every raise that follows. Suppressed negotiation, employees who don't negotiate their starting salary lose an average of $7,600 on their first offer alone, according to Carnegie Mellon research. Over a career, the compounding effect of that single unmade ask can exceed $500,000 in lost lifetime earnings. None of these losses show up on a single statement. None of them feel like a crisis in the moment. They are slow, silent, invisible. Exactly like the minor things being used against you at work. The people who understand this don't leave it to chance. They treat their career like a financial asset, because that's exactly what it is. Your earning power is the most valuable thing you own. Protect it with the same intentionality you'd give any investment.